Hey, good morning, Eastern Oregon, and welcome to this February 29th version of AM Live on EOA, your connection to Eastern Oregon. And we're also on the EOA network. And here in just a little bit, LeGrand Police Chief Gary Bell will be with us here. So, February 29th, Leap Day.
So, first Leap Day AM Live ever.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to take a minute and say happy birthday, Brady. My son, my youngest kid, this is his 8th.
He's a leaper
birthday.
Or a leapling.
Yeah.
That's
It was so funny when Kathy went into labor. Well, when we first found out her due date, she says, "That's fine. I just don't want to have a leap day kid." And so then she goes into labor at 11 o'clock at night on the 28th, and I said, well,
you're having a leap day.
Unless you plan on pant blowing for 24 hours. We're gonna have leap day.
Or just blow that thing out right now.
Yeah, we weren't at the hospital at that point. Yeah. So happy birthday, Brady. Happy 8th, Birdie.
You know, today is, most countries consider this an unlucky day.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
That's funny.
You're not supposed to get married on leap day. You're not supposed. There's a whole bunch of stuff. In Italy, they call it the doom year.
The doom year?
Yeah.
Well,
it's only started to. They only started it so we don't lose 6 hours every year.
Yeah. No, it's funny. When we moved here to LeGrand, Brady was just going into kindergarten, and we lived just down the street from Riveria, and so he comes home, and he says, "I looked on the calendar." He was in tears. "I looked on the calendar for my birthday, and there's no such date." Yeah. And explaining to a 5-year-old that leap year. That anyhow, I have lots.
You know who started
lots of
leap
stories.
year?
No.
A long time ago, 46 BC, Julius Caesar.
To make up for the thing.
Yeah. To the Earth takes exactly 365 days, 5 hours, and 48 minutes and 45 seconds to circle the sun. The occasional February 29th ensures that we don't lose 6 hours every year.
Huh.
So it might not seem like a lot of time, but when you put it over a century, it makes it so we don't lose.
Yeah, but you said, what is it? 356 days.
No, there's 365 days.
And what's the percentage?
There was no percentage.
No. Okay.
There was minutes and seconds.
Okay, minutes and seconds.
It takes 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45 seconds for the Earth to circle the sun.
Right. Okay. So, but it doesn't account. But it's not a perfect 6 hours. It's like 5 hours 45. Right.
I mean,
so anyhow, so it's kind of funny. So even with the leap year, we still are off 15 seconds every year or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't say anything about that. Most people work for free on February 29th. Did you know that?
Really? Hey, Ben,
well, yeah, if you're a salaried employee, the 29th isn't a paid day. It's not calculated into your pay. That's what it says. Most employees who are paid fixed monthly incomes will work for free on February 29th because their wages likely do not calculate the extra day.
Interesting. Well.
Yeah, free day. If you want to celebrate this special day in a big way, you either want to go to Texas or Mexico because there's huge celebrations on this day.
For Leap Day?
Yeah, for Leap Day, yeah.
That's funny.
I don't know why, but it's just
and through my life, I've met several people that are Chris Trichka. You know Chris? I don't know. And happy birthday, Chris. He's here locally, so. All right. Well, you want to do sports?
Let's do it.
All right.
AM Sports Report brought to you by Hobby Habit right here in LeGrand. They just got their shipment of Star Wars Unlimited. It's the newest trading card game on the market. This Saturday at noon, they will be having a pre-release of the set. During the pre-release, you'll get to play open packs a week early, which is kind of cool. So get over there. They'll have prizes and promos to give out during the event for everyone that participates. That's noon this Saturday at Hobby Habit, just for the fun of it. EOU women's basketball won their opening round CCC tournament match against Bushnell on Tuesday night at home. They ended up winning that game 83-62, even though they had only beat Bushnell a couple days previous to that by like 5 at home. Senior Bev Slater had 22 points and 19 rebounds. She had a huge game. And the women will travel to Southern to take on the Raiders on Friday at 5 o'clock in the semifinals. The winner of that will go to the CCC championship game. And basically, EOU has to win out to get a guaranteed spot, because Southern's the number 1 seed, EOU's the 4 seed, and so Southern has the regular season championship, so they're already in, and whoever wins the tournament gets in. So that, I mean, not saying that EOU, the women won't make the tournament on an at-large, but to get a guaranteed spot, they have to win the CCC tournament. The men lost last night to LCSC in their CCC quarterfinal game. That brings their season to an end, most likely. They were 12-17, 11-11 in the CCC. And if you were to ask Coach Kemp if 500 was what he expected this team to be in the CCC, I guarantee he would say no. This team was really talented. They just never really found the right combination of guys on the court and the right, people to be scoring the ball. We had a huge amount of talent. There's years where you just can't get it to mesh right, and hopefully next year we have a fairly young team. I think we had 4 seniors, so we have a lot of guys coming back, so that's the good part of it. EOU men's wrestling: Hunter Sparks, Braden Carson, AJ Rockwell, Kyle Knutson, and Jay Smith all start their quest for a national title today. They're wrestling at the national championships in Park City, Kansas, and it goes today through Saturday. To keep track, go to trackwrestling.com and type in NAIA National Championship, and you can find EOU in there. You can do it by wrestler, you can do it by school, and yeah, it's pretty cool. We got 5 guys that are trying for a national championship. EOU men's and women's indoor track and field are also at their national championships starting today in Brookings, South Dakota. So it's a big weekend for EOU. I sat down with Kenna Woodward and Tanner Nett from EOU track and field. They're both national qualifiers, and I asked them why EOU. Here it is.
I think a really big motivator right now is our indoor facility. I think that a lot of people, especially if they're from around here and have to endure this weather here at Eastern, then it's something really nice to have. The indoor facility, I mean, we've had 4 meets now and a couple high school meets in there, and not a ton of space in there, but it's accommodating for sure. So, we are able to hold full meets with throwing and running and whatever else. Another thing is, with getting recruited, probably, I don't know. I think just if you talk to Ben, you kind of realize that he has quite a bit of knowledge. Yeah. And when you're underneath of a coach with a lot of knowledge, you're obviously going to become better. Yeah. And obviously he's got a great track record of All-Americans and just fantastic athletes. So just, go for it. Talk to him and know that we have really great facilities here. We got a full track just to ourselves, not a football field in the middle of it. We got a full indoor track just to ourselves, and we're really lucky here. And so it's something good to be a part of for sure.
The thing is, it's track and fields at most colleges, because football is in a completely different conference because there's just not that many teams that do football. Yeah, track and field's kind of everywhere, so it's more of you just got to find a place that's good for you, that you like the coaching staff, you like the people you're around, like the environment that you're there. Yeah. Because there's some people who don't want to go to a really small town. And there's some people who don't want to go to a really big town. So it's kind of just you got to find the spot that's right for you.
Why is EOU right for me?
We have the only facility the one we have, the indoor facility. Yeah. It's the only facility like it in the entire state of Oregon.
That's crazy.
Only facility probably this side of the Rockies that a small college has an indoor track facility. Yep. Most places just have like a room that's tucked off in the back of the corner that's like, okay,
Kind of like what we used to have.
what we used to have, where we had maybe 30 meters of track, and that's about all we had.
The old gym.
So yeah, Eastern Oregon track's really good for the stuff that we have, and of course we have a coach that's been here for 20 plus years, in Ben Welch,
35.
35 years.
He's the longest tenured coach.
Yeah, and
at
he's
EOU.
every year he's bringing home the West Region.
It's
track
like it's almost
coach of the year.
automatic. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And we have Connor Bracken, who's getting the assistant coach of the year every year. And then we had Dirk Bortz, who is the throwing coach,
Yep.
who's getting nominated most years because of the people he brings.
Just became a Hall of Famer too at EOU.
He is also
He's
the
a Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer here.
EOU baseball is in Klamath Falls for 4 CCC games versus OIT this weekend, while the softball team is right here in LeGrand. Started kicking off their CCC season with #1 OIT. They play at 12-2 on Saturday and Sunday, right up here at Peggy Anderson Memorial Field. EOU softball is like 21st or 22nd in the country, and they're taking on the #1 team in the country right off the bat in this CCC. That's the toughest conference in the country. I mean, you got, I think, 4 teams in the top 25, and 3 of them are in the top 10. It's a crazy conference, and it should be really good games. I mean, EOU is going to compete this year. They have arguably the best pitcher in the nation in Kaylee Hoskins, and it's going to be some really good softball this weekend. LHS boys basketball is in Turner to take on the #1 team in the state, Cascade. They'll play that game tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the opening round of the state playoffs, while the girls get to host the game against Marist Catholic on Saturday right here up at LHS Gym. That game will kick off at 5 o'clock as well, so get up there and support these ladies. AM Sports Report brought to you by Hobby Habit. And remember, this Saturday at noon, the Star Wars Unlimited pre-release party, just for the fun of it.
Cool. Good stuff, man. Well, let's take a look at the weather outside. I guess we don't have the snow, but it's like,
Better than Tuesday.
yeah. Man,
It looks windy out there, though.
yeah, it is. I was watching the national weather, and there's just weird stuff everywhere. It's just kind of how it is. Let's look at the graphic. So, 47 today, 29 tonight.
Ooh,
Yeah, and
it's just going to get colder.
yeah,
colder.
looks like it's going to be
Colder.
maybe snow when on Sunday.
And then start freezing again on Saturday, too.
Yeah.
Well, Friday, officially.
Yep.
Oh, I guess it's going to freeze tonight, too.
Yeah.
Not a fan.
All right. Well, hey, let me tell you real quickly about one of our sponsors, Valley Insurance, downtown LeGrand. They are in the old Umpqua Bank building. I mean, it was Umpqua. Before that, it was several other banks. But went in there recently, and they have remodeled that place, and it's just really nice. And pretty soon we're gonna have a video that kind of shows you the interior and what they've done and stuff. But anyhow, be sure and check them out. They do our insurance, our personal insurance, and our business insurance, and they have a lot of tools available to them if you're looking for some kind of insurance, because they're an independent insurance agency, meaning that they're not specifically tied with a particular brand, and so then they can shop around and find competitive prices for you and your business. Joel and Matt, really good people. Be sure and check them out. Valley Insurance in downtown LeGrand. All right, in just a minute we will be back with LeGrand Police Chief Gary Bell. We'll be right back.
Eastern Oregon is full of interesting people, with interesting minds and interesting things to say. Here at EO Live, we're committed to connecting you to these intriguing people with EO Talks. We let our special guests share their ideas and life experiences with deep, open, engaging, and inquisitive conversations. You'll also be informed in depth on some of the most recent and relevant events, issues, and more. EO Talks on EO Live, your connection to Eastern Oregon, now on Roku.
All right, we're back with LeGrand Police Chief Gary Bell. Hey, how are you, man?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah, doing real good. Thanks.
Good to see you again.
It's good to be seen.
You know, it's funny because I told you a little bit about this off air. So I had a long conversation with your mom. I've known your mom and dad for 25 years, 27 years, you know, and such good people. And anyhow, they, you know, she went into, you know, your mom. She went into lots of detail, you know, about you and your childhood.
That sounds odd.
Some of which, much of which is like I won't embarrass you with childhood stories or whatever.
It's all good.
But no, and I mean she's proud of you, and
and I of them.
Yeah, and you should be. They are just really good people.
Yeah, you know, we don't get to pick our parents, but I count myself as very fortunate.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it was nice. We saw them at church, and we go to First Baptist, and they had the Heidi Ho program, and so your mom was there because it's one of her great grandkids, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, that's my brother's grandson
Yeah.
that attends Heidi Ho there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's just so rich for them. Or for a family,
Right.
to be able to have multi-generations, and they all live
Right.
close to, you know, I mean, it's not, you know, I mean, it's not unusual for great grandkids to know their great grandparent, but not to know them well.
Yeah, that's right. They've set the bar pretty high for us.
Yeah, and so it's just really fortunate that not only that you guys it all worked out for you to be alive at the same time, but then that you're also here, you know, in the same location.
Yeah, you know, when I was growing up, of course, I think it's probably like a lot of, you know, kids in high school, you know, I can remember teachers and counselors and other adults start asking like, well, what are you going to do? It's like, I had no idea, you know, I mean, and you start feeling some of that pressure. But I really didn't know if I was going to be here, but really thankful that everything kind of stacked up and played out as it did, because what a wonderful place to raise a family.
Yeah. Well, and your mom kind of talked about your career path.
Yeah.
And I think you and we've talked about that before, how that you finally getting to law enforcement, it was not something that you aimed at to begin with.
No.
But it just kind of, I don't know, remind me briefly of, you know, how you got to the place where you started working for the Grand Police Department.
So I had a really good friend in high school that moved here when he was a sophomore in high school, and he had been going to school in Tillamook. And we met each other at daily doubles football practice when we were sophomores in high school, and he didn't know anybody. And so I started chatting him up and befriended him, and it turns out that he's my lieutenant today. That's Jason Hayes. And so we went through high school. We were great chums. Neither one of us knew what we were going to do post high school. We both ended up going to school in those days, it was Eastern Oregon State College, and general education stuff. And somewhere in there, like my freshman year in college, my dad is a veteran of our armed services, and I believed that what I wanted to do was pursue a career in the military. And so I enrolled in ROTC at EOSC at the time, and those were my favorite courses. And most of the courses, there were tactics and things like that, orienteering, but most of the courses surrounded leadership and principles of leadership. And I loved it, So I thought that was the career path that I was going to pursue. I competed for and was awarded a ROTC scholarship, and I got scared because with that came a commitment. And I was young, and I just wasn't certain. And so I've always been fortunate to have, and early in my life, be surrounded by some adults that I feel like imparted some solid wisdom on me. And I remember being told, it's like, if you're not sure, just don't do it. It's not the end of the world. And so I didn't do that. And but there was a moment where it's like, now what?
Right.
Because everything I thought I was going
Right.
to do, that just I've switched gears. And I think probably for a lot of the same reasons. I was attracted to the structure, the organization, leadership. We had some family friends that were in law enforcement, were police officers, and I visited with them. I did a few ride-alongs with a few different agencies, and it was super attractive to me. And I feel like that in life, we need to pay attention because there's certain things that will present themselves, doors open, and I don't know why, but everything clicked. And I kind of did this backwards, but I transferred from a 4-year school from Eastern to Blue Mountain Community College because they had a criminal justice program. And I got the best grades that I had ever got in my academic life because I loved the courses. I loved the reading.
Well, and it made sense. It applied to where you were going.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait for test day because it's like I had the knowledge. And then following that, I tested for a few different law enforcement agencies. And LeGrand Police Department is one of them. Initially, I didn't think that I wanted to work in my hometown.
Right.
But I tested and was not selected. And the lieutenant at the time reached out to me and asked me if I might be interested in considering being a reserve police officer. I had never thought about that, but I pursued that. And that was in August of 1993. And all that did was solidify. I had a full-time job. I worked for the state later on. For a little while, and so I was doing the reserve volunteer police work, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the people at the police department, and another opportunity came up just after the beginning of the year, and so in February of 1994, I was hired full-time, and
Wow.
here I am.
Wow.
Yeah, but I've always, not a single regret about the career choice, and I think it was just meant to be, and I count myself fortunate that I was able to recognize those doors when they opened. And
Now, how old were you then when you started at LeGrand?
well, I had a full head of hair, let's put it that way. I had enough hair that I could style it if I wanted to, but I was 22 years old when I became a police officer here.
Oh, wow. So you covered a lot of ground between the time when you started at EOU to the time that
Right.
Right. Well, I guess you were in the ROTC program simultaneously while you were.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, but I feel like that I have absolutely no regrets.
No. Yeah.
About the time that I spent in ROTC. I have fond memories of the staff of the program. The courses were. I feel like that they helped create, going back to family and the character that I had been. Instilled with, but those courses I think were instrumental in, developing me as a leader. And Brent, I never endeavored to be the chief of police.
Yeah.
I can remember as a young police officer walking by the chief's office and not being entirely sure what he actually did. And that isn't a suggestion that he wasn't doing things.
Right.
He was a busy man, but as a young officer, I didn't understand all of the things that were on his plate day to day.
Yeah.
But I remember equating that to, it's like, gosh, why would I want to, because I loved the job. I
Right.
loved what I did. I loved
Right.
going out and working with people in the community. But one thing led to another, and I had an opportunity pretty early in my career to test, and I was surprisingly selected for promotion to the rank of sergeant, and that was my first kind of like official leadership role, at least within the organization. I feel like every police officer we have, every officer that I have, is a leader in the community. But I absolutely loved being being a patrol sergeant, quite frankly, may be the best job in the ranks of a police department, because you're in that role of leadership, and you can mentor, police officers and do what you can to take care of them and set them up for success. But you're also, in that you got one hand in that realm of management, administration, and can kind of help steer some of the training and things that go on in the organization. So it's a really good spot to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was, other than your parents, can you think of people that demonstrated leadership in your life, or a coach or whatever? It's like, man, they know how to motivate, because the element of motivating a group of people and leading them someplace, that's not a small task. Who can you think of someone who you like, wow, I like how that person leads?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you is that there's lots of them. And I pay close attention to a lot of things. And that's always been something that, is just part of my makeup. And so from a very young age, Doddsy and I were talking earlier about, high school coaches, and I played football and baseball and, all of those things. And, guys like Len Cachado, and his style and his leadership style, that left an impression upon me. Lieutenant Jason Hayes' dad was an Oregon State trooper, and he was he retired as a lieutenant, and he was commanding both the LeGrand and the Baker City stations at retirement, and I knew him, and I watched how he did business and carried himself. That was inspirational. Doc Savage, that's a throwback, but Doc Savage was the high school football coach for a very, very long time. I watched how he did business. And then within, the police department where I'm still today, I had some field training officers when I was a brand new police officer. A guy by the name of Jack Lane was an incredible inspiration to me. Scott Whittington, who Scott started at the police department before I, and has since retired, but he was an inspiration to me. And here's the thing, I draw inspiration still to this very day, and I even see leadership characteristics in people who, I have young police officers who I see the way they do business, and that inspires me.
Yeah.
So I draw inspiration from lots of places. And honestly, I have learned things, both good and bad, from working for people. And I try, and always have, to take that to heart and to learn from that. And it's like, you might see something, it's like, that's solid, and I'm going to try to recreate that.
Yeah.
Or I might see something, it's like, that's poor.
Yeah.
Not going to do that. But
Right. Yeah, and those are sometimes the things that, as a leader, that direct you, is like, oh wow, I feel badly for that situation. I want to do everything I can to avoid that kind of thing.
But I'm not purposely leaving people out, but a lot of folks in our community know people like Scott Franks and Phil Meyer. Those guys, they were at the police department for a very long time.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the most important components of leadership is you have to recognize and learn how to treat people.
Yeah.
Because leadership is people business.
Right.
And if you're unable to do that, then it's probably not the right thing for you.
Right.
And I've learned a lot of those things from many different folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's how interesting and how valuable for you to be able to draw from so many different people. You brought up something that Kyle and I have talked about offline about, and it's just interesting that sometimes police officers that retire from the military and then become police officers. They retire from the military and then they become police officers. How that, is that transition smooth? Because, and I guess I'm reflecting back on, you started in ROTC, so that was the direction that you started, but then you went and they're two different missions. I mean, and I don't know. You might be able to explain it better.
They're
than I
completely
do.
opposite.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
In the military, you're taught to, like, shoot first, ask questions later, and as a police officer, you're taught to ask questions first, shoot at last resort.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, what are your have you seen people make that? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh yeah. I have a lot of positive feelings about veterans and those that pursue careers in law enforcement. It's a good fit. And you guys are absolutely right that the rules of engagement for our armed forces and our veterans are very different than the rules of engagement for police officers. Sometimes it's not a positive or warm and fuzzy thing to think about, but we have military and the capability in this country for a very specific purpose, and that's for war,
Right.
And to defend our nation. Those veterans or those soldiers are trained for that.
Right.
That's not what we're training. We're not training our police officers for war.
Right.
But a component of our officers' training they have to be silent warriors, so to speak, because they have to have the ability to act in a moment's notice and act without hesitation if that's what is called for. But we certainly don't strive for that. That's
Right.
not what we're looking for. But a lot of what we're doing is reacting. But the fit is really nice, though, and we have quite a number of veterans at the LeGrand Police Department, representing most of the branches of our service. But the order that they get in terms of their training in the military, the structure, following a body of rules, policies, everything from their self-discipline, how they take care of themselves, their fitness level, and how they represent the city of LeGrand and the police department in their command presence and the way they present themselves and communicate with people. All of those things are attributes that they have learned in the military or in their service, and those are valuable to them in their service as a LeGrand police officer.
Yeah.
So absolutely, yeah, and veterans make great police officer candidates.
On the other side of that, are there times when you have candidates come in and they don't have that formal training or they don't have that formal discipline, but maybe they're super relational? They're,
Right.
Their gifts are in a different direction.
Right.
And I mean, how do those two different kinds of candidates, how are you able to pull them in?
Right.
And kind of round out the entire personality of the police force?
Yeah. So, keep in mind that when we hire a police officer, it doesn't make any difference if, they have been in, the Marine Corps for 4 years, or if they have been in college, or if they have been working in a trade, or maybe it's their first job. And that seems maybe odd, but, when I was a youth, very few people didn't have jobs when they were just old enough to do it. But there's a lot of, early 20-somethings that haven't actually had a job before. But keep in mind that we have our own basic training, if you will. It's not boot camp, but we have in-house training. It's called the Field Training and Evaluation Program. Very similar. There's a lot of standardization in the United States in policing now in terms of entry-level training. So that would equate to on-the-job training, and that's about 4 months where you're assigned to. In our agency, you're probably going to have at least 3, maybe 4 different what we call FTOs, Field Training Officers. So that's an officer that is experienced, and they're working directly with the new officer and teaching them the ins and outs of policing. But then in addition to that, they're going to the Basic Police Academy, which is in Salem, and that's 4 months there. And so, you're getting probably somewhere between 8 and 10 months of training as a new police officer before you are released to do that job by yourself. And so that's very similar, to what, happens in the military in terms of basic training, because we're just going to give you all of the foundational skills that you need. By no way, shape, and form have you, at that juncture in a police officer's career, have they learned everything. I'm still learning, right? We never stop learning. But, it's interesting because if you're talking about veterans or, officers that come from, some other walk of life, my philosophy is that diversity of experience, diversity of thought, actually is a strength for the LeGrand Police Department and our community. Because here's the thing is, there's times that we think, man, we have that one sergeant who has, his military experience in the Marine Corps, he's locked in, he does a great job. And, you might think that's like, boy, if we could just have them all that way. But that wouldn't be the best of circumstances if we all thought the same at all times, because, we have a lot of complex decisions that need to be made every single day. And, sometimes our newest officers, they have we encourage, input. And, sometimes you think that maybe someone is younger in years, experience, that they don't have, they got great ideas. We listen to them. And so that diversity of experience and education and thought processes, that all culminates into being a strength. And I think that speaks also to, we have veterans, we have non-veterans. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to ask you, and I think you did. So do you guys have a pathway? Are you all ever in the same room at the same time talking about issues? And is there a pathway where somebody can bring ideas to the table, even if they're stupid ideas at times,
absolutely.
or ideas that have been tried in the past, or whatever the case might be.
There's, that's one of the things that you may have heard, that police organizations are paramilitary organizations, which means that they're kind of like the military. It's not as rigid, but we share very similar rank structure in terms of, we have police officers in the LeGrand Police Department. We have police officers, and then they're supervised directly by a sergeant, and then we have a lieutenant that oversees the sergeants, and then myself. So we have rank, so there's structure that way. But every single day within those shifts, you have police officers, and then we have a sergeant that oversees each shift, and they have a daily briefing. So the night shift and the day shift will come together both in the morning and the evening. They work 12-hour shifts. And so there's a briefing. So there's exchange of thoughts there, in addition to just sharing information about what's gone on the previous shift. So there's that warm handoff on what's going on in the community. But that's also an opportunity to have what we call shift. But once the briefing is over, that doesn't mean that opportunity is closed. The sergeant has interaction with the officers all day long, so there's opportunity there. The sergeants have access to the lieutenant and myself. But then we also have, once a month, we have what we call sergeant staff meetings. And so that's where all of the sergeants, the lieutenant, and I come together, and we discuss, any issues that are going on, ideas for training. There's opportunity for roundtable, things like that. And then the sergeants will take all of that information back and brief each of their shifts respectively. And interestingly enough, I'll share, we're just talking about police officers, but we do the same thing within our communications division, which is where the dispatch center is. So the dispatch supervisors, we come together and do this same exercise. But then from time to time, we don't do it quite as frequently as monthly because of the cost involved. But we'll have department meetings. And it's not just a meeting where everybody sits around and listens to one person talk. Oftentimes we're doing training topics and things like that. You've been involved now for a number of years when we do the annual police officer memorial ceremony. That's a day where we have all of the officers there. But the ceremony is, it's pretty quick.
Right.
But then on that very same day, we also participate in department-wide training and communication. Because there are things that it's not, there's nothing like hearing it all together at the same time.
Right.
And sometimes, officers have questions or thoughts that are beneficial for everybody to hear at the same time.
Yeah.
But we have communication is absolutely critical, I believe, in the success of organizations. And so we have lots of pathways for communication, and it happens day in and day out, all day long, 24 hours a day.
I can
honestly.
imagine.
Yep.
Yep.
And the lieutenant and I get phone calls all hours of the day, and we encourage that, though. It's like some people like, man, you get woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like, nope, that's our job. We're here for those. I mean, we encourage sound decision making and support that at the lowest levels, and all of our supervisors make great decisions. They all possess wisdom, probably beyond their years and experience, but we also want to be, the lieutenant and I both want to be sure that we're there for them. Just sometimes, oftentimes, and I learned this from some predecessors. Sometimes what happens is, people just need affirmation. And so, a situation might be briefed, in the middle of the night, here's what's going on. And instead of, as a command level leader, providing the answer or saying, okay, do this, this, and this, maybe what we do is say, what's your plan? And what oftentimes I have found is that, those sergeants or the lieutenant, they know exactly what they need to do.
Yeah.
And my response is going to be, sounds good.
Yeah.
And, so I think that's a good tool to mentor and just reinforce leaders.
Yeah. And it's probably unique for you to have been, like you mentioned, you used to walk by the chief's office and there were probably those situations where, maybe you had a situation and you're dealing with it and all of a sudden it was like, oh, the chief just pulled up, and now you're that dude. Now that they're watching your car pull up to the situation.
Yeah.
I would imagine that there's a little times that's like, that's a head swimmer. It's like,
well, yeah. I think the unique situation for me and where I'm at in my career is that I've done all of these jobs.
Right.
And I know how the young, officers look at me, because I looked at the then chief of police the same way.
Right,
I mean, I know how old I am,
Right.
and how long I've been around.
Yeah.
I've been there 30 years.
30 years this month.
Yep, 30 years this month.
Yeah.
How did you know that?
Because you just said February.
Oh, yep, exactly.
February of '94.
So I know, that I don't feel like I'm the old guy.
right,
I feel like I'm just one of the guys still.
right,
But I also respect that they're doing it day in and day out.
right,
And I think that that's a benefit that, so when they, talk about a particular process or something, it's really beneficial that it's like, I get it real quick,
Right.
because I've done it.
Right.
I've written lots of police reports.
yeah,
But I also have a full measure of respect that, hey, they're the ones that are on the front lines, in the trenches. So I don't inject like, well, hey, you should be doing it this way.
right,
That may have been the way that I would have done it.
Right.
But there's lots of things both in our work practices and in life that it's like, just because I did it that way doesn't mean that that's the only way
Right.
to do it. In
Yeah.
fact, I pay attention. It's like, they do that really well.
Right.
So no, we lots of respect for those guys, because they're the ones, and I think that many know it, but I think it's worth hearing me say it, and that is that I share data about what's going on, and it's not just our community; it's every community in the state of Oregon right now. Our legislature currently is talking about some changes that we need, but the data and the calls for service, the police officers that are doing the job that I did 25 years ago, it's a tougher job today.
right,
Not to suggest that it wasn't a difficult job then, but the social challenges that these officers are dealing with day in and day out, they're greater than the ones that I was dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, like the whole auditing and people,
Yeah.
trying to hold police accountable, like that's gotten out of control. I don't know how much we deal with it here, but man, if I was a cop, I'd smack somebody.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you wouldn't
they're
be a cop
so
very long.
disrespectful. No, I know that, which
Yeah.
is why I'm not a cop.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some jobs I just couldn't do because I don't have the patience for it. You
Yeah.
know, but people are, of course, there's bad cops. Don't get me wrong, there are. But people are so disrespectful to cops nowadays compared to like when you first started. There's no doubt about that. It's
Yeah.
so different.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But the constitutional auditors that you're speaking
Oh,
of,
they drive
I
me
mean, here's the
crazy.
thing: is that we from a very early stage and throughout our training and our policy, our meetings, you're not going to find people that embrace and support. And truthfully, part of our oath is to defend the Constitution of the United States and Oregon. So we get it. We're not in opposition.
Right.
But it's a tough job. And when people, may, exercise what is a constitutional right to record activities, we don't bristle because we're concerned that somebody's going to see something that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing. It's just that what that does is add additional difficulty to an already difficult, maybe dangerous situation. Something what some people might see, because you see it on TV, even maybe in some of the cop shows, like a traffic stop. A police officer, there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop. Police officers get hurt on traffic stops. We have
Absolutely.
police officers that have lost their lives, lots of them, on what may seem like just an everyday, police
Speeding.
and community member contact, and maybe a violation for speeding or an equipment violation. But so when a police officer is engaged in that activity, they're working, they're doing their job,
Right.
and part of their training and the officer safety that goes into that is not just focusing and paying attention to what's going on with that traffic stop or the individuals that are in that car, but it's also paying attention to what's going on in their surroundings. And if you have people that then inject themselves, albeit within their constitutional rights to do, what that does is it divides that officer's attention, and it makes a situation just more complex for that officer. So it's very frustrating. You're exactly right, Dodsey. But we provide training on that now too. And that's just the variables of complexity that have continued to evolve in this line of work is what I was speaking to in terms of the job is more difficult today. And I think that you would hear that from lots of veteran police officers that what we're being asked to do to accomplish our mission, it's more challenging today than it's ever been.
Yeah.
A lot of those auditors too, they just push because they want a reaction.
Because they're looking for something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gets them views.
That's right.
That's the number one thing.
That's
And
right.
it's like you sit back, and if you have any like common sense at all, you're like you sit back and you're just like, what? Like, do you understand that like somebody can die right now? Like just you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah, and it does happen here from time to time, and I think it would do everyone well to remember that those officers that are wearing the uniform for their community, they're people.
yeah.
Police officers, are not hatched.
Right.
And
But
they
out
are
of a petri dish.
They are human beings, and they were schoolmates with people.
Their kids might be friends with your kids.
That's right.
Like,
That's exactly right. They like to barbecue. They like to do all the things that anybody else likes to do. They're just people, and yet they have answered that call for public service, which is there's lots of critical roles in our communities and important jobs, But here's the thing: we need people to be willing to serve our communities, and not just as police officers, but in other ways. We need school teachers. We need people to be willing to do these jobs. And if we make it so difficult that nobody, and we have experienced some of this in our nation.
Yeah,
I mean, we are seeing a genuine change in the number of people that are interested in pursuing this as a career field. And you really don't have to think about it very long before you can land on maybe why that could be. It's like you turn on the TV and you see, social media, and our police officers are just getting
treated like crap.
lambasted, at every turn. And you're exactly right when you mentioned earlier, Dodsey, that it's like, are there police officers that get out of line or that do not follow the rules or may violate someone's rights? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not picking on any particular career field or profession, but that's a human being
yes.
thing.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
And any job or career where there's human beings, there's the same thing. And I'm certainly not picking on any of these, but it's like doctors, lawyers, teachers, newsmen.
Right. Yeah.
That's because the common denominator there is the human factor.
Right.
But we have arguably one of the most robust mechanisms within our profession to identify and weed those people out. Because I can tell you that the people at the LeGrand Police Department and a lot of other agencies, we don't want them any more than the community does.
Yeah.
So we really need, and it sounds horribly biased, but we need to cherish our police officers.
Right.
We need them, because when it's all fine and good, right, until it's no different than a fireman or the people, the EMS personnel in that ambulance.
Right.
You don't need them till you need them, and when you need them, you need them.
Yeah.
And to deter young people from, I've been doing this for 30 years, and what an extraordinary experience it's been for me and my family. And, I think it's not for everyone, but, for those that are interested in it, I think it's an absolutely incredible career option. So
Yeah. It's funny, interesting story. So I think it was last year or the year before, I happened to be in Troy on 4th of July, okay? And which is a weird place to spend 4th of July, but I mean, they do it up in that town, okay? And so and there was a recent Wallowa County sheriff's deputy that was there that particular day, and so I had had a chance to interact with him, like, well, how's it going? How did you end up with in Troy? How did you end up with this assignment? But because he was not young, I mean, he was probably your age, and so it was just a weird fit. It was like, I mean, it was a weird fit for somebody in their 50s to be a deputy in Troy. That was, so the whole thing did not come together. He goes, well, I've been on the job a week. I was like, really? Well, where did you come from? And he goes, I quit Portland. He'd been a Portland police officer for 20 years, and it was a thing. It's like, it's just not. I loved being there. I loved serving there, but it just was too complicated to be there any longer. So here's a veteran police officer. And I mean, he couldn't be in a place that's more opposite than Portland to be in Troy, you know.
Yeah.
So, but still, it was. I mean, we saw that. I mean, when we were going through all of that stuff, it's like, no, everybody who does a job, even if they love it, they're looking at the benefits versus the costs. And if at some point, it's not a matter of money, it's a matter of, I'm not going to do a job even if I'm doing it well. And there are some people that recognize the value. If nobody values what I'm doing, it's just too much of an emotional toll. Yeah.
And, what we do day in and day out in our community to accomplish our mission, it requires the community's not just support, but help.
Yeah.
We can't do this on our own.
Right.
So we're as transparent at every chance that we have, and through that mutual relationship of respect with the community, we draw the legitimacy to do the job, because it's like, look, to enforce laws, rules, everybody generally is excited about, we need to have, these rules basically in order for our society to function smoothly. A lot of folks are not super excited when it's them that get stopped for speeding, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like there's also just that understanding and respect that it's like it needs to be done.
Yeah.
And it goes back, and I know that I have spoken about this, on the show before, but every chance we get, we need to be, communicating with people, interacting with people, and treating people in our community the way we would want to be treated, or I would want a member of my family to be treated. You can't go wrong if you do it that way. But we have an incredible community for lots of different reasons, but we feel the support from the community, and it's necessary. I mean, I can't even imagine how we would, do the challenging work that we do day in and day out if we didn't have the support from the community. It would be an entirely different job.
Yeah. So before we quit, I want you to talk about, because 911 is under LeGrand Police.
Correct.
And talk about how first responder calls related to drugs have increased over the last 3 or 4 years. And I mean, Nick Vora gave kind of an overview of that the other day, and I'm sure a lot of that data came out of the 911 center. Just because, I mean, people need to understand that the impact that this has had on LeGrand locally here.
Right. Yeah. So, we have data that supports what we have experienced locally. It's the same that we're seeing all over the state. So, a 3-year look back, our calls for service related to drug overdoses, as an example, are up 500%. So calendar year 2020 to calendar year ending in 2023, a 500% increase. And those are calls for service that, they take a lot of time. Our calls for service related to individuals that are struggling with mental or behavioral health, they're up 155% over the last 3 years. Those individuals that we're dealing with, there's oftentimes drug addiction that is going with that. Our calls for service related to homelessness, where the individuals we're dealing with that fall within that category, it's a disproportionately high number of people that are also either drug addicted or dealing with mental behavioral health, or both. Those calls for us are up 429% over the last 3 years. Our trespass calls for service are up. So there's a lot of public order categories of calls that are up that are directly connected to this dearth of drug issues. I'm paying very close attention to what's going on in our legislative short session right now. House Bill 4002 with -24 amendments has my full support. I think that is exactly what we need to get some relief. But it's problematic because it's not only just, Brent, the number of calls for service, but when we have police officers, so if you have garbage, we know who to call. You call, Waste Pro. If you have a tree issue, we have services for that. You call that. If you have a fire, we know who to call, right? The police, and it's all cycles through the dispatch center, there's a lot of things within a community where it's like we don't have a specific phone number or a specific organization that deals with that. And so the police get those calls for service. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that a lot of times these issues, it's not an easy solution. We don't have like a magic tool in our toolbox where we can just fix that and move on to the next call for service. So these calls that I'm talking about, where we haven't had the statutory support to do anything really about the drug issues, they just repeat, and we have to go and try to mitigate it the best we can. But there's really no solution. And so those calls for service take more time, and we oftentimes end up dealing with the same people multiple times in the same shift sometimes. And so it's very frustrating, because police officers generally are folks that we want to solve problems. You know, we want to help folks and we want to solve problems. But sometimes when we're talking about addiction, you know, if we don't have the appropriate resources, it's really challenging. So it gets to a point where those calls and the volume and the weight of that, it gets kind of crushing.
Well, and the firefighters and EMT have also
Right.
been significantly,
That's right.
because every time there's one of those calls, they've had to, I mean, thankfully the city, I think, has responded to that and given them more funds to increase, you know, those first responders.
And don't
in
leave
that area.
out, you know,
Yeah.
our Grand Round Hospital's emergency department. I
Yeah.
mean, there's lots of organizations that have been impacted in a way that we need the relief that the legislature is
So,
talking about.
Chief
right
Bell, I have a question.
Yeah.
When it comes to the you said 500% more?
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
On
when
drug
it comes
overdoses.
Overdoses?
Yeah.
Is that like what's the number like compared? Is it more drugs coming in, or is it that we're just dealing with a different monster? Because we haven't always had fentanyl. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And fentanyl, you know, if you ever feel like as human beings we have lost our ability to develop, I mean, really? I mean, when we think that we've got, if methamphetamine's not bad enough, if heroin's not bad enough, then we have to, you know, start utilizing fentanyl and see that, you know, in its counterfeit forms. You know, I mean, fentanyl's been around
Forever.
as a pharmaceutical for a very, very long time and used appropriately with good success. The problem is that, you know, when it started being counterfeited in Mexico and proliferated throughout the United States, it's everywhere, and it's super dangerous. So we just keep upping the ante. So
Right.
yeah, that absolutely is part of the issue, fentanyl.
But we are also seeing more
yes.
drugs coming in.
Yeah. It's just that the availability is greater than it's ever been before, you know, because we had with ballot measure 110 changes, you know, the premise I think was sound, and a lot of people, as they understood it, where, you know, the people that are suffering or in the throes of addiction, they need treatment, 100%. That's
Yeah.
true, and they need treatment today, not a month or 3 months from now. Right. When they're ready, they need treatment available at that very moment. But that didn't happen at that moment in time, and the truth is that these drugs alter brain science. They alter brain chemistry, and when people are in the throes of addiction, they're not likely to volunteer to make a change. And so when you take away that consequence that forces through the law, that forces people into treatment, then we're not doing people any favor. And I think that I know a lot of people who have been drug addicted in the past that would agree with that. And that consequence is what very likely may have saved their life and family members.
Most drug addicts will say that are clean, especially, that they have to be locked up to get clean.
Right. Yeah.
Because then your brain starts working right. You get a couple months clean and things are kind of getting back to normal, and then you start making better decisions.
That's right. Yep. But we need to have the law so that there is that consequence that forces people down that path. But then we have to have robust healthcare treatment options for people so that it can embrace them and provide them what they need in order to get well and stay well.
But I think what you're saying, and I agree, and I think Gary is too, is that it's the collision of Measure 110 and the negative things that came along with it, and fentanyl coming onto the market in a huge way, that has
Yep.
just created an absolute disaster.
monster.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's funny because I mean I was talking to a law officer the other day, and he said that he has talked to users who are in the middle of a run, who are in the middle of a binge, and they themselves have said the changing of this law, the way it is right now, it makes it much harder for me to, because there's no disincentive,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyhow,
But we need the course correction, and we need it bad, because we're talking about the persons and maybe their families that are suffering as a result of the addiction, but this has much further reaching ramifications. I mean, we're talking about a diminished workforce.
Right.
We're talking about what's happening to our children.
Yeah.
And the amount or maybe the frequency of neglect for our
Right.
kids that, when we see and recognize the prevalence and the rate by which this, people are addicted, that's not happening in a vacuum. There's lots of other ways that is impacting our community, and we need to make a course correction.
Well, and I think that Measure 110, if I'm understanding, I mean, it mainly dealt with the user and the benefits to the user of decriminalizing it and helping them get treatment. But it really didn't focus at all on the cost, the way that might affect all of those other things that you're saying, And so then when we zoom on statistics and we say, well, yeah, this is the best way for people to become, get off drugs, which I probably would disagree with. But when you zoom in on that doesn't measure all of the other factors. That doesn't measure how it has impacted so many other things,
Right.
So,
Yeah.
well, hey, thank you. We've gone over our time, but we just always have such great conversation.
Yeah.
And appreciate you taking the time to be on. And I think we have you scheduled every other month for the rest of the year, and so that's awesome.
Yeah, even if you are old.
Even if you are old.
And even if I didn't realize, I thought about getting up and leaving as soon as we started, because you said that the 29th, that I'm working for free today.
You are working for free.
So
Yeah, go home.
I didn't realize
Hang
this
'em
was
up.
a volunteer thing, but then I got to realizing it's like I quite frankly probably do a lot of work for free, a lot. So it's like, yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
But before we go, you got to tell me. So non-leap year, what day does Brady get his
Well,
birthday
and that has
celebrated?
been a controversy because you would think on non-leap year days, non-leap year years that he would celebrate on the 1st. Okay.
Okay.
And so because that would be when the 29th would be. And so then but then somewhere along the line there became a little bit of confusion in the family, and some of them congratulated him for his birthday on the 28th,
Yeah.
and then some on the 1st. Well, now he's just he's taken advantage of that.
I think he
And
should
he's
just embrace. I got 2 days.
And he has. That is exactly right. This is the only time that he really only has one day that is his birthday.
Yeah, good for him. Happy birthday.
Yeah,
to him.
happy birthday.
All right. On this day, which is only
February
every 4
29th.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
1877, U.S. inventor Thomas Edison demonstrated his hand-cranked phonograph for the first time. On this day in 1890, the very first Army-Navy football game. Who do you think won?
What year again?
1890.
1890.
They've been playing that game for 134 years.
Army, Navy.
Yeah,
Army.
Navy.
Oh,
24 to nothing at West Point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1942, U.S. Office of Price Administration rations coffee for everyone at 10 pounds a year.
Huh.
There must have been a coffee shortage in 1942. 1948, on this day, the first opera to be televised, Othello, was broadcast from the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City. 1972, on this day, co-founder of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, releases Pong, the very first commercially successful video game. Yeah, 1972.
Wow.
And then last year on this day, Taylor Swift is Spotify's most streamed Global Artist of the Year. How many? Guess how many streams in 1 year for Taylor Swift?
I have no idea.
26 billion. 26 billion streams
26
in 1
billion,
year.
yeah,
Yes,
wow.
on Spotify.
Wow,
That's a lot.
that is.
That's a lot. That's numbers that we can't even fathom. Like,
No,
Number one song in America on this day in 1984, Jump by Van Halen. And then the quote of the day comes from Helen Keller. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. And I think I've done this one before, but I like it.
Yeah.
One more time. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart.
yeah. Interesting. I heard a comparison the other day. The difference between 1,000,000 seconds is like 19 days or something like that. Okay, but 1 billion seconds is 30 years.
Yeah, it's something crazy.
Yeah, so it's, you think a billion, it's hard to even get your mind
It's like
around.
the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire.
Right.
Is a million millions.
Right. Yeah. It's just a crazy.
You have $1 million
amount.
1,000,000 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thanks, Eastern Oregon, for tuning in. Appreciate you being here, and happy birthday, Brady. See you next week.